Central African Republican coup leader Michel Djotodia is forced to resign at a regional summit in Chad aimed at stopping months of religious violence in the country. The Associate Director at the Center for Regional Integration in Africa, Dr. Vladimir Pidanso, says the resignation was expected as he had failed to control rebels he led to overthrow President Francois Bozize in 2013.
It was to be expected since the rebels are multiplying in their forms, and it has turned on to a kind of national disaster where there is nobody in control. And so his resignation is not any signal to the effect that we're going to see any kind of stability soon. There is need for more action, for international action, in order to bring some kind of sanity to the Central African Republic.
On today's big story, we'll take a look at the crisis in the Central African Republic and continue fighting in South Sudan. My name is Bright Nanamfo. The nation of Michel Djotodia followed after a two-day summit of the 10-nation Economic Community of Central African States in Chad. According to the Associate Director, Center for Regional Integration in Africa, Dr. Vladimir Pidanso, the international community must bring all factions to the negotiating table to negotiate and end the crisis. He also said international peacekeepers must enforce the peace and disarm any militia which refuses to hand in their weapons as a way to tackle spiraling interreligious violence.
It was to be expected since the rebels are multiplying in their forms, and it has turned on to a kind of national disaster where there is nobody in control. And so his resignation is not any signal to the effect that we're going to see any kind of stability soon. There is need for more action, for international action, in order to bring some kind of sanity to the Central African Republic. There is need for bringing all the warring factions to the table, for each grievance to be heard and analyzed. If we begin to support any one faction against the other, which the international community is quick to do at times, we'll be doing ourselves injustice there. I strongly suspect that what is needed is to bring all the warring factions to the round table and for them to really bring their grievances for a solution to be found. There's need to force the peace first. The international intervention should force the peace. Make sure that they fight any rebel group which is not ready to lay down their tools. After we lay down the tools, then we bring them to the table and start jaw-jawing. And that's what I think will solve the problem over there.
Professor Kojo Gavwa is the Director, International Relations and Cultural Diplomacy at the Ghana Institute of Governance and Security, GIS, and Irbad Ibrahim is an international news analyst. They will join me to look at the Central African Republic issue, the standing down of Michel Djotodia, if it is the solution to what is happening there. Welcome, first of all, to Professor Gavwa.
Thank you very much.
Now, first of all, the concern is that Michel Djotodia is the problem. But is he indeed the problem in the Central African Republic?
Well, we can point at one person as being the problem. He may be the immediate problem, but there must be remote causes. Causes that we all have to keep our eyes open, our ears open, and identify. The problem of the Central African Republic is not unique. It is a problem that is common to many African nations. Who are the fighters? What are they fighting for? Sometimes it's very difficult to even determine what these people are fighting for. Are they fighting for personal gains? Are they fighting for the common good? Are they fighting on behalf of another group of people that may not even have a direct stake in the Central African Republic? That is to say, those who control the resources of Central African Republic should be held accountable for some of the things happening in that country today, just as those who control the resources of other African nations that are loggerheads with each other should be brought to book in terms of what is happening. So I'm not going to,
So you're saying that there are remote causes, so we can say that his standing down is not the solution to the problem in the Central African Republic?
It's turning down may just be a strategic move. It may be a strategic move which one can capitalize on and bring peace to that country.
Right.
However, if he steps down and there are other people fanning the fire in that country, there will not be peace right now.
You spoke about certain remote causes. As you said, the fighting. What are the people fighting for? In the CAR, what do you think that people are fighting for?
That is what I mentioned earlier, that it is difficult to determine what people are fighting for. Dr. Anshidansu mentioned that all the factions should be brought together. They should table what their interests are. Then there can be JoJo. Then there will be negotiation of whatever their interests are, and then they can find a common ground. However, at this stage, it is very difficult to determine exactly what they are fighting for. Is it political power? Is it control over resources of Central African Republic? Is it ethnic conflict? Is it a recognition of one person over the other, the person who has resigned, or who? It is very difficult to know what exactly is motivating them to fight. That is why one is saying that perhaps once in a while we should look beyond those doing the fighting.
Professor Gavwa, kindly hold the line for me. Let me speak to Irbad Ibrahim. He's an international news analyst. He's just joined this discussion. Irbad, thanks so much for staying there for us.
You're welcome, Brian.
Now, first of all, let's look at the man who is stepping down, who is leading the Muslim minority against the Christian majority. Can we describe this as a conflict, a religious conflict?
Yeah, you wouldn't be far from right to assume so, because since the Central African Republic gained independence from France in 1960, there hasn't been any opportunity for the minority Muslim community in the country to lead the country. So he was a novelty, he was the new kid on the block, and therefore it was a tectonic shift in the status quo. That was why the majority Christians could not come to terms with the fact that the Muslims should rule the country. So he was an integral part of the problem. And I think the outcome of the summit in Chad today is a cornerstone victory for diplomacy. But it's too early to hit the cloud nine in jubilation. We should receive the news of his resignation with cautious optimism. The question most people will be asking now is, will any replacement appeal to the general masses of the people? That remains everybody's guess. The country is now polarized on religious lines, and the indelible scars of war, as you know, are quite difficult to obliterate, right? So I think I'm delighted that we have come this far, but I think solving the CAR conflict will take a huge burden from the shoulders of the African Union. But much needs to be done. The first thing I think that has to be done is, for now, when you look at the timetable of the transitional period, they are to hold elections by the end of this year.
Right.
So it will be very difficult to pacify the Muslims who feel embittered now, as if the wind has been taken out of their sails currently. It's not easy to let power go like that.
Right.
So
Ibrahim, hold it there. Let me chip in this. I've been speaking to Professor Gavwa. He's on the line listening in. He is the Director, International Relations and Cultural Diplomacy at the Ghana Institute of Governance and Security. Now, he thinks that it is difficult to even find out what the people in CAR are fighting for. Now we have a Muslim minority and a Christian majority. Do you agree, or do you believe that we can put a finger on what these people are fighting for?
Perhaps I think there are some external interest in what is happening internally, and that happens in every conflict. There is a growing body of evidence that most of the rebels that helped Michel to topple Francois Bozize were selected from Chad. That is why the 4,000 AU peacekeeping force there, the Chadians amongst those peacekeepers are being attacked by the Christians as well. But Chad is not any formidable country in the region to want to destabilize the CAR. I think this is a bottled up frustration that has been there for so long, and it has only exploded at this time. So we have to be very savvy, we have to be very tactical in dealing with the current situation. So in the interim, Bryce, what I suggest is there should be an international oversight responsibility over reconciliation, because it's difficult to convince the Muslims that whoever is to rule the country as a Christian now would be equitable in sharing the resources of the country. And therefore, that should be done. And if they would want to adopt the Nigerian system of the northern president, southern vice president, that would help them in the interim. So that before we hold elections by the end of this year, since the Christians are in the majority, we could have a Christian president and the prime minister could be a Muslim, so that we evenly share low-key political positions to the grassroots at the local government level, as the international community awaits the timetable for holding the general election.
I'll come back for us to talk about the power vacuum that has created, but let me get to the other line. Professor Gavua is still there. Now, Prof, first of all, we know that Michel Jotodia standing down is one of the solutions. You also mentioned that there are certain remote causes. Now, let's look at the power vacuum that has been created. Is it not likely to worsen the conflict situation?
Well, the power vacuum may not worsen the conflict situation, because once we deal with human beings, that vacuum will quickly be filled by somebody else. But as it's been said by my colleague, there needs to be an immediate solution, even if it calls for an ad hoc measure that would level up things before we get to that general election. And then there must be planning towards that long-term solution when they hold elections. Now, this issue about Muslims and Christians fighting, I think it is just one of the issues that may be put up front as the cause of the problem.
Right.
Muslims and Christians have been fighting not only in Africa, but globally. If you watch the Middle East, sometimes it's a conflict between Christians and Muslims. You can see some of those in Iraq. You can see some of those in Syria. You can see some of those in so many other nations. But is it that Africans just want to be fighting? Sometimes it's blamed on ethnicity, as if we just divide ourselves on language groups and start fighting each other. Now it's being shifted from the ethnic thing to the religious thing. But as I mentioned earlier and alluded to by my colleague, there are remote causes, there must be external causes. So whoever we're mediating must try as much as possible to be an honest broker. Sometimes the mediators themselves have their own interest in the mediation. So whoever will mediate must be an honest broker to ensure that the interests of those people, especially the ordinary people of the Central African Republic, are paramount, rather than the interests of those leading the fighting faction. The Islamic leaders versus the Christian leaders must all be questioned.
How difficult is this power vacuum going to be? We're told of a very bad humanitarian situation there. Now, when the announcement was made of the standing down of Michel Jotodia, we're told that we had Christians getting onto the street to jubilate. According to information we had, Muslim communities were quiet. Now, who gets to fill this vacuum? Is that not enough to perhaps throw this already troubled country into more troubles?
Yeah, it appears so. But this is the opportunity for the AU, the African Union, to demonstrate its supremacy over all these conflict situations in Africa. The AU can step in there, have an arrangement that everybody would respect. But if the AU itself chickens up and waits for something to happen and they follow, I don't think there will be any solution. Then that is when the conflict will escalate because of the power vacuum. That power vacuum should be filled immediately, and the AU must step in, either by nominating its envoy to handle affairs, identify someone within the country who is well respected by both factions to fill in the gap in the meantime.
Ibrahim, let's stay on this issue of the Muslim-Christian division in CR for some time. Now, when the announcement was made, as I told Professor Gavua earlier, the Christian community took to the street jubilating. The Muslims were quiet, as far as the information we know is concerned. We are looking to immediately fill that power vacuum to keep this country running. How do we do this? Looking at the conflict, the friction between the Muslim minority and the Christian majority?
Bryce, in the current situation, we seem to have a victor and a loser, and the Christians feel like they have the upper hand right now, and the Muslims feel embittered, and therefore we can't downplay the religious nuances in the current conflict. I fear for the vacuum that has been left, because there is a philosophy in Islam that is called Salibiyya, and this philosophy has to do with the use of Western powers, the Western Christian imperialist powers, to torpedo Muslim regimes both in North Africa, parts of East Africa, and the Middle East. And therefore, with the advent of the intervention of the French in December last year, the French poured in up to 1,600 troops into the streets of Bangui. So the Muslims will now look back and analyze the situation. And the conclusion they will arrive at is perhaps the Christians did not have the nerve to topple the government, and therefore they have sought the help of a more powerful Christian force, France. And therefore we have lost the power today. That is why I think more has to be done to convince the minority Muslim population in the CAR that this is not a marginalization that has been orchestrated by the larger international community to rob them of an opportunity to rule the country. Nobody would want to be the ruled for forever, and therefore if they had the opportunity for a brief moment of time, even though the modus operandi in wielding power was quite illegitimate because the coup is unacceptable, now the Muslims feel embittered, and the earlier we are able to pacify them, the better it will be for us. That is why I think if there can't even be an equal sharing of power between the Muslims and the Christians, for the fact that the Christians make up the chunk of the 4.6 million people we have in the CAR, let's appoint the Christian as the president. And therefore, we pacify the Muslims by giving them the prime ministerial position, so that they will know that they also have a say in running the country. Because right now, they have the jihadists who are in other parts of the continent maybe whispering to them that this is a crusade that has been waged by Western imperialist powers. And unfortunately, what we are seeing in other parts of the continent, like in the case of Al-Shabaab in Somalia and Boko Haram in Nigeria, may be the outcome of the current political vacuum.
Right. But hold the line for me, both Professor Gavua and Ebrad. Let's switch to another very critical issue on the African continent, and that is to Sudan. Now, that's another critical issue. But here, the Associate Director of the Center for Regional Integration, Dr. Vladimir Nchidanso, is also saying that it is crucial the international community brings stability to South Sudan to ensure international terrorist groups do not take advantage and establish bases there.
Bringing stability to South Sudan is very, very, very important, because other than that, it's going to be a heaven for all kinds of groups of people. Al-Qaeda, Al-Shabaab, and that kind of thing will always conglomerate over the place and make the world unstable. If North Sudan is able to help quell the process over there, then it will be a bargaining chip. It will be something that will help in normalizing the relationship between the South and the North. And I believe al-Bashir knew this, and he intentionally wanted to help the South Sudanese get some sort of stability, and then they could continue their talk, especially where Abiy is concerned, and the oil revenues and the piping and things like that are all concerned.
National Relations and Cultural Diplomacy at the Ghana Institute of Security is also been making some comments about this particular issue. Right, so let me go back and speak to the two gentlemen who have been speaking on CAR, the Central African Republic there. First of all, to Professor Gavua. Now, the issue in South Sudan now, we have peace talks stalling because of certain conditions that were not met. Is the country perhaps getting deeper into the abyss of conflict?
Yes, it appears so. It appears so, but it is not unique. Once again, it's unique because this is a new African nation, and we have to look at the global community of states. Are they interested in an emerging African community that will be so powerful in terms of oil revenue? Now, the thing in South Sudan today can only be resolved by the Sudanese themselves. they have to realize that this has happened to other nations before them. We can point at Congo, the Republic of Congo, Democratic Republic of Congo. We can point at all other nations who have, and then those particularly in the southern sector, like Angola, Namibia, who have managed to resolve these issues to a large extent by themselves. We can bring external forces and external brokers to mediate and ensure that there is stability in this country. When the economic issue is at stake, it's about the oil. It's not about ethnicity. It's not about South versus North per se. Even if the North is involved or any external force is involved, it's about the economics of the oil. That is what is happening in South Sudan. How can we allow a small, new country to control so much wealth? So the Sudanese have to go back and rethink themselves as Africans, especially the leadership. Do we want to amass the oil revenue to ensure that our people have better conditions of life, or are we just going to play the same old game that other nations have played to the extent that Africa is still in this same predicament over so many years with our natural resources? This is how I see the issue in South Sudan.
Right, thank you so much for speaking to Professor Gavois there. But let me also wrap up with Elbad Ibrahim. Now, Elbad, briefly, the situation in South Sudan, we are not making any headway at all. Is that what you think?
Yeah, Bright, I think diplomacy has failed. Both factions feel like they are winning on the battlefield. And over the past 25 days, we've seen that the battlefield has been quite fluid and erratic. We read that the government forces have overrun the city of Bentry. Bentry may be significant, but the city that holds the key to the resolution of the conundrum will be the flashpoint city of Bo. So we anticipate that since both factions have assumed intransigent positions, the only way we can solve this is by driving a wedge between the two of them. And I'm very happy that Salva Kiir seems to have made some, advances against the rebels. We just wait. If in the next few days he's able to consolidate his foothold in the city of Bo, then I'm sure Riek Machar will be forced to come and sit around the negotiation table. But for as long as the pendulum of the victory on the battlefield seems to be swinging in both directions, both of them will feel like they are winning, and they will assume an entrenched posture, which will not help the cause of diplomacy at the end of the day.
Thank you so much for joining us. Elbad Ibrahim is our international news analyst. But let me stay a bit more longer on the issue in the Central African Republic. Christian majority, Muslim minority there in conflict. Let me go to the West African Network for Peace Building project manager, Chukwumeka Eze. He's joining us on phone to look at the same situation in Nigeria, where the Christians, as we're talking, are fighting against Muslims there. And Chukwu, thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Now, first of all, the situation in Nigeria, where we have Boko Haram targeting Christians in the Central African Republic. There's a conflict between Muslims and Christians. Now, tell me, in Nigeria, a conflict between Muslims and Christians, how it has affected development of the country and how difficult it is to deal with.
I think, first of all, it's important to put this in perspective.
Right.
I don't think it's entirely right to consider the issues in Nigeria as that of religion, especially bearing in mind that the members of the Boko Haram insurgents, they are not just targeting Christians alone, they are also targeting Muslims alike. So their grounds have to do with what they consider to be the state not living up to its expectations, especially on those demanding for better living. While on the other side, those looking for ideological issues are also looking at the total Islamization of the country. So even those who are practicing Islam at the moment in Nigeria, they consider them not to be practicing the true Islam.
Right.
But if you compare that with what is happening in the Central African Republic, I think what is happening more and more is that those who perpetuate violence are aware that you cannot do that if you do not attach any element of value to whatever cause you are fighting. And religion happens to be the only vehicle through which you can actually mobilize population along religious line, bearing in mind that it has to do with issues of faith and dogmatism.
What lessons can we draw from what is happening in Nigeria? What lessons can the CAR draw from Nigeria?
I think the lesson to draw is that there is a nexus between development and conflict. It has been established. So if where you have violence, development is meaningless. Where you have enormous development, then conflict tendencies is reduced. So I think it is important, especially now that the current president have resigned. I think it is important to begin to look at the root causes of the violence rather than just look at the surface. I think what the international community, including our own African Union, have done over time, and France, that is the colonial masters of Central African Republic, what they've done over time is to attack the issues in a reactive manner rather than approach it holistically. What led to where Central African Republic is today, and how is it devastating to the economic situation over there?
Thank you so much for speaking to me, Chukwu Meka, as with the West African Network for Peace Building, talking to me about the situation in Nigeria and how the CAR can draw lessons from what is happening there. Time now to wrap up the first segment of today's big story, and we're ending Friday with an interactive segment, and we'll be talking more about some more local issues. My name is Brighton Enough. I'll be welcoming Gladys in a couple of minutes. Stay with me. I'm coming back in a moment. Right, you welcome back to the big story. Time now to do the interactive segment, and we're going to talk about, I'm sure, a very interesting issue that you definitely want to stay interactive with us. We'll be talking about the man, the ex-president, Rawlings. Gladys, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Nana.
And Rawlings has been in the news for some time.
Another boom in the making.
He's been talking about his other former presidents.
And his sleepless nights.
I see. We'll hear what he has to say.
Yes,
welcome
we have
once
more.
Again to
Thank
the show.
you, Nana. Thank you. So, my name is Gladys Osei. Radio. Welcome to the interactive segment. So this is where we do interactive with you, of course. So you can join us on our Facebook, and Facebook is facebook.com/joynewsontv. You can also tweet, and it's that's on twitter.com/joynewsontv. The handle is @joynewsontv or #JNinteractive. So keep your comments coming through, and just in case you want to do email, is joynewsim@multitvworld.com, and of course your WhatsApp. Keep them flowing, and let's do this together. Oh, my nerves. Whenever I think about this man, I smile, and I'm sure I'm not alone. On social media today, you've been discussing his recent utterances on corruption and who caused it, and on and on and on. Well, today we are discussing former President Jerry John Rawlings. So we all know Papa J. Whenever he talks, boom. And no matter how you look at it, he is expressing his opinion. Anyway, let me share with you his latest, speaking as the guest of honor at the closing ceremony of the regional camp of the International Youth Fellowship at the Adidome Senior High School in the Volta region. Ex-President Rawlings accused Mr. Kufuor of stealing massively while in office between 2001 and 2008, and went further to describe him as autocratic thief. He alleged that corruption was so bad under President Kufuor that the U.S. government sent its intelligence chief at the time, Porter Goss, to warn him to curb it or face a military coup. Okay, so for those who were not there, let me give you the opportunity to listen to Papa J.
When people get up, they want to create the impression to you, the young ones, as if the corruption started with this man, the young man, John Mahama. No. It started Kufuor was an autocratic thief. Because, do you people remember one of the first signals he gave to the country when Issa something, the deputy used for something, stole some money, they claimed. Did you see how he had it dealt with and jailed immediately? He was sending a signal that nobody is going to steal unless him, his family, or his friends, or unless he gives you the permission.
Well, I'm sorry, but I can't just help laughing. Well, Papa J also said late President Mills should have punished Kufuor and his cohorts when he took office in 2009. Let's listen to him again.
After all that he took this country through, you know something? We won 2008 and took the country back. The country was so poised to see that injustices, the corruption and whatnot, dealt with in order to write the tree of justice. Mills refused to do it. Late Mills refused to do it. And that was the beginning of the true destruction of the moral fabric of this country. In spite of his holiness, his refusal to investigate and to deal with the crimes of the Kufuor regime is what led finally to the institutionalization of corruption in this country.
Well, so we have lots of your comments coming through already on Facebook. We have lots of them. But let me just start with our WhatsApp. Let's see what you have been posting on our WhatsApp page. So Sakwadia says, I think that he should be called to order. Has he forgotten the state of our country? So that's coming from Sakwadia Safunoa. All right, so let's just keep looking on. And David Mensah says he is the worst corrupt of them all. Interesting. All right, so David, that's your opinion. Nana Yao Penny says he should give us a break. Well, yeah, so I hope you already have your break, Nana Yao. Ezekiel says, I think Mr. Rollins is going too far. He needs some advice and some work to get him busy. Okay, so Freedom Zigato says he might have a point, so I think the media should give him time to speak up what he got to say. I see. All right, so of course your freedom, so you think freedom is important. Alfred says he is not fair with former President Kufuor because his government was equally corrupt. I see. Eric Aite says, oh, Rollins pa, Papa J. Okay, so Godwin says his deeds are hunting him. He hasn't seen anything yet. Really? Godwin, what do you have to show Papa J? Well, Juventus says let him take it to court. We just pray he won't go spending another 8 months in court. Andy says, of course, he is always harsh. What at all is his problem? He should leave our gentle Jack alone and rather focus on his party, NDC. Okay, varying opinions coming through. We'll look at a bit more WhatsApp. Samuel says, Abba, let him talk about how he infringed people's rights in his tenure. Okay, so Iketia says Rollins' post-presidency has not been that encouraging and smooth. So Francis says, Papa J, you pow, which of them is as corrupt as Mahama and his 40 thieves? Huh? Awusu says jealousy is eating him up. Really? He realized that Kufuor has received international recognition after his term. Hakim says Mr. Rollins is 100% right, but his fault is the timing of what he is saying. No wonder Kufuor ever said corruption started from the time of Adam. Well, maybe he has a point. That's from Kobe Eben. Midu says Mr. Rollins spoke the truth. Yes, you may not like the way he went about it. Nonetheless, he spoke the truth. If Ghana have thousands of Mr. Rollinses, Ghana will be a more, I'm sure you won't say, a better place. Okay, so that's from Amide. Emmanuel says, I think it's quite natural to be jealous over a more promising, lovable, patriot, and excellent charismatic rivalry as John Ejekum Kofuo. Papa J. Juliet J says, now he has nothing to say. All right, so Richardson says, good news. Oh, okay. Richardson, okay, so Richardson's still on, and I should be moving to Facebook. We have lots of your comments there. I just can't wait to read them. We posted on Facebook, Mr. Rollins